Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a profoundly dark subject, one that really remains one of Britain's most chilling criminal cases. The crimes of Fred and Rosemary West. We're going to be diving into the source material that covers about 2 decades, from 1967 all the way to 1987, a period of just sustained terror, mostly focused on one address, 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester.
The House of Horrors.
Exactly, the House of Horrors. And our mission today is not just to recount the events, but to really unpack the timeline, to look at the nature of their partnership and understand how this could have gone on for so long before that final shocking discovery.
And framing this is so important. This isn't just a gruesome story, it's really a historical turning point. The case exposed these deep systemic flaws, and it directly led to, frankly, long overdue changes in UK law enforcement, especially around missing persons and child abuse.
Okay, so let's start the beginning then, before Cromwell Street. The sources are pretty clear that Fred West already had, established violent tendencies.
Oh, absolutely. Long before Rosemary. He had a history of theft, sexual violence, just general abuse.
And that escalated very quickly. Around 1967, our sources suggest he was likely involved in the murders of his first wife, Rena Costello, and her friend, Anne McFall.
And what's key there is the modus operandi was already set. We're not just talking about murder, but dismemberment, burial in isolated fields. These weren't impulsive acts, they were calculated.
And the detail that really stands out is that Anne McFall, she was pregnant with Fred's child.
Yes. So he was essentially wiping out complications from his life. It set this absolutely horrifying precedent.
And this is right around when Rosemary enters the picture. She was just 15.
15 years old. And the sources are really crucial here. She wasn't some victim who was just drawn in. She became an active co-conspirator. And the speed of her complicity is, I think, one of the most psychologically disturbing parts of this entire story.
The ultimate proof of that came in 1971, right? While Fred was in prison.
That's it. He was locked up for theft, and Rosemary, on her own, committed her first known murder.
She murdered his stepdaughter, Charmaine West.
An 8-year-old girl. It was like this gruesome initiation, proving she could act with just as much brutality as him, independently. She buried Charmaine's body in the garden of their home at the time.
So that became their method.
It became their favorite disposal ground, yeah.
So we're in the early 1970s. Fred's out of prison. They have this shared murderous pattern down, and they move to 25 Cromwell Street. This is where it all becomes, for lack of a better word, standardized.
Cromwell Street became their anchor. And you have to understand, it was just a normal-looking house on a quiet street. It was the perfect camouflage.
So tell us about the pattern they used. Who were they looking for?
They preyed on the invisible. I mean, the people who were least likely to be missed immediately. They targeted runaways, hitchhikers, young women who needed a cheap place to stay.
People on the margins.
Exactly. The lure was always a false promise of safety, a job, a room for the night. They were playing on a basic human need for shelter.
And once a victim was inside, the routine described it's just unimaginable. Sustained periods of torture, sexual violence, and then murder. And Fred was so efficient at disposing of the bodies, burying them in the cellar or the garden.
And that allowed the cycle to just keep going, completely unchecked. If you look at the catalog of victims just from Cromwell Street, you can see how regular the killing became through the 70s.
Okay, so let's walk through that, starting in 1973.
73, you have Linda Go. She was a family friend, so that was opportunistic, someone close to home, easily isolated. Her remains were found in the cellar, dismembered.
And then later that same year, the profile seems to change a bit with Lucy Partington.
It broadens significantly. Lucy Partington was a university student. She was abducted from a bus stop.
So a complete stranger.
A total stranger. It shows their confidence was growing. Her body was buried right under the house itself.
And it just continues into 1974.
Yes, and the contrast in victims that year shows you how wide their net was. First, Shirley Hubbard, a 15-year-old girl taken on her way home. The detail about duct tape wrapped around her head is just that.
Wow.
It speaks to the level of control.
And then Therese Siegenthaler.
Also in 74. A Swiss student hitchhiking through the UK, lured in, tortured, killed, and buried in the garden. So you have a local schoolgirl and an international student.
Both fitting that profile of being vulnerable and isolated?
Precisely. The people who wouldn't have an immediate major search effort mounted for them.
And it's important to remember, as you said, this pattern started even before Cromwell Street with Fred's first wife, Rena Costello. The house just became the centralized dumping ground.
The intent was always there. The house just made it easier.
So this external violence is just escalating, but it's tragically mirrored by what's happening inside the home with their own children. And this is really where the story starts to pivot towards their downfall.
The sources are very clear on this. The West children lived in this constant state of terror. They endured severe physical and sexual abuse. I mean, that kind of internal pressure is just, it's unsustainable.
And the ultimate internal victim was their daughter, Heather West. By 1987, she's a teenager, and she's threatening to expose them.
And that defiance sealed her fate. Both Fred and Rosemary participated in her murder. They buried her under the garden patio.
And that particular murder, it didn't just add another body to the count. It created this unbearable tension that finally broke the silence.
It did. And it came out in this truly chilling way. Fred started making this joke when people asked where Heather was.
He said she was under the patio.
He said she was under the patio. And that casual, horrifying remark was the exact thread the police needed to start pulling.
So in 1994, police were already looking into abuse reports from the family.
They were, yes. And when Heather's disappearance was raised, and someone mentioned Fred's unsettling joke, that's when authorities decided they had to search 25 Cromwell Street.
And the moment they started digging, everything changed.
Instantly. Once they started unearthing human remains from the cellar, from the garden, they realized this wasn't just a missing person case. They had stumbled onto one of the most prolific crime scenes in British history. The arrests happened immediately.
The legal outcomes, though, they went in two very different directions.
And very frustrating directions for the public and the victims' families. Fred West confessed to several murders, but then he hanged himself in his cell in 1995, before his trial.
So, no public conviction, no day in court for the families.
None. Justice, in his case, felt incomplete. Rosemary, on the other hand, she denied everything, right to the very end.
And she was found guilty.
Found guilty of 10 murders, she was given a whole life sentence, which means she will never be released.
So the final count officially is at least 12 murders.
At least 12, yes. But the sources all suggest the true number is likely higher.
And the house itself, 25 Cromwell Street, it became the symbol of the horror. What happened to it?
It was demolished in 1996. It was a very deliberate act, both pragmatic and symbolic. They wanted to prevent it from becoming some kind of grim tourist attraction.
But the legacy goes so much deeper than just a demolished building. You mentioned the systemic failures. Let's really get into that. What did this case expose about law enforcement in the 70s and 80s?
It exposed a massive blind spot. Back then, runaways or hitchhikers were often treated as, voluntarily missing. Their cases didn't get the same urgency. There wasn't the same centralized system for cross-referencing information. The Wests exploited that exact gap.
So what changed? What were the specific actionable things that were put in place because of this case?
Well, the sheer scale of the Cromwell Street discovery forced a massive institutional change. After '94, there was a huge push to improve how social services, the police, and health agencies shared information, especially about historical abuse allegations.
So breaking down the silos between agencies?
Exactly. And, maybe most importantly, it led to the creation of national databases for missing persons and dedicated resources for cold case teams. Police protocols for excavating properties, the forensic approach to mass graves in domestic settings. All of that was standardized because of this case. It was a wake-up call.
So that structural reform is really the deep dive takeaway here. The cultural fascination, all the books and documentaries, it all comes back to that one question. How could this happen for so long?
And the answer is a combination of their depravity and a system that was, at the time, ill-equipped to see the pattern. It just shattered the illusion of safety.
So we've unpacked the timeline from 67 to 94 and looked at their methods for targeting the people society often overlooks.
It is a truly sobering story. But the source material also highlights the resilience of the people who finally did seek justice, the family members who eventually spoke out and triggered that 1994 investigation. And this brings up a really important question for you, the listener, that builds on those procedural changes we just talked about. The Wests preyed on specific vulnerabilities: runaways, people in abusive homes, those desperate for shelter. So knowing that, and knowing the systemic failures they exploited, what ongoing role does community vigilance play today in protecting these same groups? How do we make sure that the protocol changes from 30 years ago are enough? How do we ensure that vulnerable individuals are never again allowed to become invisible to the systems designed to protect them? That is the challenge this history leaves us with.